I'm honestly not sure if it's like a chicken and the egg thing, because at the one hand, if you have a fairy tale now, because we all grew up with them, there's like this built-in resonance to it, like that you can't get with something that you have just invented because people haven't lived with it long enough, if that makes sense. It's like to use something that's not a fairy tale, but I remember someone saying about a story, the problem here is that what this story about superheroes wants is Batman and the Joker, but you can't have Batman and the Joker because it's not, that universe, but you need the built-in resonance of all of us knowing the characters in the story and the conflict sort of as the sort of cultural gestalt. You get the reflections of it, and so when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is, and it goes right down sort of to the bone with fairy tales. But I don't know if there is something about them in particular that is why we all read them as kids, or if because we read them as kids, there's something about them in particular. I don't know which it is.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 169 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me this week is my co-host, the bestie from the Midwestie, the queen of my days, Greta. How you doing, Greta?
Good. I'm very excited to talk about fairy tales. How you doing, Adrian?
This one's for you, basically. So. I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Having a great time chatting with Ursula today. But just first, if you want to support Greta, the queen of my days, go check out Days. You can check out Frozen Crown and the Seventh Queen. If you're just into just good fantasy, really solid fantasy, heists, and lovable fuck-ups across the board, Greta's got you covered.
And of course, go check out Adrian's new book, Mushroom Blues. It's out wherever you buy your books. Get some, murder, mayhem, mushrooms. It's got it all. Go check it out.
And also, if you want to support MJ in her quest to quit her day job, you can go check out Among Thieves, her debut novel. If you're a fan of swearing and hatchets and fights and people cutting off fingers, MJ's got you covered.
Axes and assholes all the way.
There we go. With the Tales of Tomorrow.
There was nothing about that sentence I didn't like.
Yeah, go check out Among Thieves, Ursula. Great read. As well, a quick note for listeners, you can support SFF Addicts on Patreon for a ton of cool extras like bonus episodes, author readings, and more. So check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, joining us once again is the wonderful Ursula Vernon, aka Kingfisher, author of Nettle and Bone, the newly released Hemlock and Silver, and so much more. Welcome back. How are you?
Delighted to be back again. Hi, everybody.
Delighted to have you. Hello. A heads up, this is our part two of our two-part chat with Ursula, so I recommend checking out part one to get to know her better and to hear about all of her gore and arson and all that fun stuff. Today, though, we're making a wish and changing the story as we delve into a masterclass on Fairy Tale Reimaginings. Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Welcome to Transference, where death and sickness are but a distant memory. Nicholas Fiveburrows is a sicko, someone that takes on others' illnesses. In a city where diseases can be transferred, the rich buy longer lives without pain, and the poor get a short life of constant sickness. Brought back from the brink of death by his friend Brian Meadowhearth, or maybe the invisible hand of an outside actor, Nick finally gets the chance to try and change things, to finally stop the whole disease transfer network. Tensions escalate as Nick infiltrates a higher society he doesn't understand, and starts to fall for Dorothy Sungate, the very person he needs to manipulate to be successful. And between run-ins with a talking cat, genetically modified humans, and a robotic police force, the world around him just keeps getting stranger. Can Nicholas tear down the disease transfer architecture? And how much of his humanity is he willing to bargain along the way? A dystopian vision of healthcare and a market economy, Transference will appeal to fans of Red Rising, Blade Runner, and the BioShock franchise. Soon to be a complete duology with the release of Transcendence in the summer of 2025. Transference by Ian Patterson is available now in paperback and ebook. Get your copy today. And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts. So to kick this off, just what is your personal relationship with fairy tales? How's it been, from the time you were growing up until today?
I read a lot growing up, as I think a lot of us did. And I don't know why, but for some reason, reading fairy tales as a kid is not necessarily a gateway into fantasy. It seems like all of us read fairy tales, but we don't all wind up at the Dragon Riders of Pern next. I don't know what the connection is. But yeah, I had all of these books of fairy tales and often very strange ones from very different places around the world. And then I grew up, reading them, liked them, grew up on Disney, as so many of us did. And then at one point in my early 20s, I had a job at the world's most boring workplace, which was the St. Paul, Minnesota Streetlight Outage Hotline, where my job was to sit next to a phone and take calls from people informing me that their streetlight was out, and that I would file a ticket and send it to somebody who dispatched crews. This was occasionally exciting because any hotline where you talk to the public, every now and then you will get some very interesting people. We had a standing policy that anyone who called up who said that the streetlights went out when they walked under them, and were we following them or were they Messiah, just went straight to a manager. But it also was one of those places that it was great to work at in many regards, despite being boring, because they would let you do 4 10-day work weeks. So I would frequently be in the office for 3 hours after everybody had gone home, and they did not have internet trackers in those days, but we did have internet. So I would just sit by the phone, and I wound up at the University of Pittsburgh Folk Tales collection, which was maintained by, I think, D.L. Ashlamon or something, which is just like a web 1.0 HTML page that is nothing but hyperlinks of classifications of fairy tales. So if it was under Bluebeard, you would have 12 different stories from collected from various different cultures, and you could just read one after another. And I spent weeks on that website reading 8 different versions of Snow White or whatever for as long as the job lasted, which was about a year, I think. And then I don't even remember what happened. Perhaps I just got tired of streetlights.
I mean, thank you to the Streetlight Hotline for giving you time to read fairy tales, but also how many complaints do they need to justify having a fucking hotline for the streetlights? It amazes me.
The problem is that the crews will crawl, basically do a sweep of the city, checking each streetlight. But if a couple go out or something, it's worth dispatching a special crew so people stop complaining. It's one of those little tiny jobs that on some level you knew had to exist, but that no one ever thinks about, because why would you? So yeah, one of these days I'm going to write a novel where it'll be a horror novel, I'm sure, where the heroine's extremely boring day job is the streetlight outage hotline, and then she gets dragged into some other thing. But I haven't come up with it yet.
You'll figure it out.
Can you tell us what some of your favorite fairy tales are, either from that period of your life?
Oh, thank God. I was afraid you were going to ask what my favorite streetlights were. And,
well, there's this one streetlight in St. Paul.
Sing me a song of the ode of streetlights.
There are so many really cool fairy tales that it's hard to know which one is my favorite. But Robin McKinley, who has written some of the best fairy tale retellings ever, and if you have not read her books, as soon as this podcast is over, go and read them, said once that she thought everybody had a fairy tale and they just spent their lives finding different ways to retell it, and hers was Beauty and the Beast. And I read that and thought immediately, mine is Bluebeard. And then I was like, whoa, why is mine Bluebeard? What? Huh. My first marriage wasn't that bad. Okay, interesting. But yes, I really liked Bluebeard. I like the idea that for the creep factor, that in the house you're in, someday there might be a door and you open and what behind it is terrible and you did not know it was there, kind of thing.
That's awesome. I love
it.
Greta, what's your favorite? Just out of curiosity.
Oh gosh. That's tough. I have really fond memories of Snow White and Rose Red because that's one my older sister, she's 8 years older than I am, but we shared a bedroom and she used to read that to me before bed. I'm like, oh, nice. Sisters.
Super cute. I like Hansel and Gretel. Just like, I don't know, like the Grimm version, like the Grimm fairy tale of it is so fucking good. It's so good. But I love it when it's like, the more disturbing it gets, the more I enjoy it.
It is wild how many fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel seem to hinge on, we don't have enough food, let's abandon the children, or occasionally let's eat the children. Yeah, you can tell what some of the prevailing concerns of medieval Europe may have been.
The preoccupations of the time, what we're having to deal with. Ursula, what do you think? What do you think it is about fairy tales as a method of storytelling that you think has, I mean, you know, they've gone back so long, and folk tales and fairy tales and all this. Why do you think that method of storytelling has resonated with human beings for so long?
I'm honestly not sure if it's like a chicken and the egg thing, because at the one hand, if you have a fairy tale now, because we all grew up with them, there's like this built-in resonance to it, like that you can't get with something that you have just invented because people haven't lived with it long enough, if that makes sense. It's like, to use something that's not a fairy tale, but I remember someone saying about a story, you know, the problem here is that what this story about superheroes wants is Batman and the Joker, but you can't have Batman and the Joker because it's not, you know, that universe, but you need the built-in resonance of all of us knowing the characters in the story and the conflict sort of as the sort of cultural gestalt. You get the reflections of it, and so when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I know what this is, and it goes right down sort of to the bone with fairy tales. But I don't know if there is something about them in particular that is why we all read them as kids, or if because we read them as kids, there's something about them in particular. I don't know which it is. I do think there's probably something to it, because something more than just, you know, Batman and Joker, for example, because you look at various cultures and you will find different versions of the same fairy tale. There are, like, you know, you go all over the world and there is a story about a woman who marries someone who turns out to be a tiger or a dragon, or keeps his dead wives in the attic or something, or the devil or whatever, as one does. And so, you know, it just comes up over and over again. And there's like a version of Cinderella where the sister who gets horribly mistreated winds up, you know, marrying the prince or the caliph or the sultan or whoever, and lives happily ever after. It's, you know, there's something that just comes up. There's one in Greece that Cinderella starts out with the sisters killing and eating their mother. I mean, so sometimes the trappings are very strange, but it winds up sort of falling into the same pattern.
The kids just winning one back against the adults.
You know, for every Hansel and Gretel.
Probably they read Hansel and Gretel and were like, we know what's going to happen next, and we're just gonna
You're not
beat you to
catching
the
me,
punch.
mother. So you obviously are known a little bit at this point for having written a few fairy tale retellings. Why do you think you keep coming back to them? Is it this sense of cultural touchstone that you just haven't quite put down yet, or do you think it's something else?
Plots are hard. That's about 75-80% of it is the plot. You get the plot is sort of built in most fairy tales. I do depart somewhat from that. Hemlock and Silver does not fall out like the normal Snow White story, but if you start with a fairy tale, you at least have a roadmap, and even if you diverge wildly, you know where the road is, and you can circle back to it at some point, kind of thing. There's sort of a you don't have as much of like the tyranny of the blank page per se. You have like a set piece, and then you get in there like, okay, well, no human would actually do that, so let me change that and let me tweak that and let me decide to set this all in a slaughterhouse in a medieval city, and let me do this other thing and whatnot. And but you have sort of a starting place, and I like that.
Yeah, just to have a framework to kind of build on, and
yeah, and
then you fiddle around with it and like, you know, mix it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you can go all sorts of directions. It's just that you have like a starting place that you know what it is, and then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Very cool. And we spoke a little bit about Hemlock and Silver last episode, but can you tell listeners a bit more about some of the other fairy tale reimaginings that you've done?
I did one of my very first was called The Seventh Bride, and that is a Bluebeard story where a young woman marries a nobleman and shows up, and except in that one, instead of having all of his dead wives in the attic, all of his live wives are living in the house. They're like, yo. And she's like, okay, this is a little strange. And it comes out that he has, by using marriage contracts, has taken something from each of the wives. And some of them are very strange. There's one of them is a witch whose magic he took, and one of them is a woman he took her voice, and another one is this very strange creature that the clock wife, who lives in the clock and is not tethered in time the same way that a lot of other people are, and he takes her death because he needs to give it to somebody else. And anyway, so it was fun. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I handed it in to my children's book editor, who said, basically, you thought this was a children's book? That's adorable. No. And no arson, though. So I got that going for me. But and then I self-published it, and the very nice editor friend of mine was like, yeah, literally you have a Cenobite from Hellraiser answering the door. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess she does kind of look like one of those. Well, didn't think about it. So yeah, anyway, I did one that's called Bryony and Roses, that is a fairly straightforward Beauty and the Beast retelling, which was basically me going, how can I write this story so it doesn't sound like Stockholm Syndrome the musical? And then I did one called The Raven and the Reindeer, which is based on Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. And Hans Christian Andersen is weird because I think he is the only person I know of who has written new fairy tales. Like, all the rest of them came down basically from wherever. There was the woman in France who wrote Beauty and the Beast, which the original is really weird and is like 100 pages long, and Beauty and the Beast is like the first 15%, and the rest is about fairy politics, which were probably incredibly hilarious if you were French at the time, and
right.
it was
in Versailles the right then.
Right. But so like those two people wrote new fairy tales. I don't know how, but the Snow Queen, where I was like, okay, we're going to do a lot of changes to this because she is too good for this jerk K that she's chasing around, and also the Hans Christian Andersen's idea of a happy ending is everybody dies in church, and so I was like, no, we're fixing that too, and it parts get a little weird. The heroine turns kind of into a were-reindeer by being sewn into the skin of a dead reindeer and then cut out of it, and winds up taking up with the bandit girl, who is a minor character in the book, and they go off and fall madly in love and send Kay home to live with his grandmother. So I like that one too. That was good. But anyway, yes, a lot of times with fairy tales, I'm just like, I got to fix this. Okay, this is not okay. Versus this is not how people act, and it's inspirational. Sometimes I'm not saying bad exactly, but sometimes things that are wrong are very inspirational because you go in and you're like, no, that's not how that would work. I will show you how this would work.
I love that because like so often you approach these like big, like timeless stories, and it's almost like you're afraid to play with it too much and like twist it. But I love that you just have like free license to say, fuck that. I'm gonna do what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you pick which story you're gonna tackle next? But then when you do pick the story that you want to twist and retell, what is your approach to like identifying the fundamental elements of the tale and then twisting it? Do you have a set way of doing it, or are you more of a discovery writer and just learning it on the way?
Well, usually what I do is I just read as many versions of it as I can find, and frequently there are a lot. Again, the University of Pittsburgh Ashliman folk texts site is great for that because they're just all lined up. So, and I will go through and I'll be like, yes, no, okay, that's interesting, but I don't know if it belongs here. And I'm just trying to sort out the parts that feel very essential to the fairy tale to me. And so, for example, in Sleeping Beauty, or not Sleeping Beauty, in Beauty and the Beast, Beauty has monkey butlers, and there is. I don't know why, but when it was written in France, apparently that was the thing: is you had monkey butlers. Yeah, and so when I'm writing a Beauty and the Beast story, I do not feel obligated to add the monkey butlers in because I'm like, this is just going to be a whole thing, and I don't want to deal with that, and it doesn't like feel like part of the story for me. I'm pretty sure the Grimm brothers left it out. So it's things like that, and there are some elements are bigger than others. You can generally get rid of the monkey butlers whenever you want. With the version of Beauty and the Beast I did, Bryony and Roses, I was like, okay, in almost everything, the father ends up, staying at the Beast Castle for a night and has to send his daughter back. And I'm like, forget the father. We're getting rid of him. He's not adding anything to the story here. And we will just have the heroine herself do it because, I wanted the agency of I have gotten myself into trouble and I will get myself out of it kind of thing. So, there's some parts that just feel like important. Like I felt like Beauty and the Beast, it always comes back to like a rose, and there's a rose petals and whatnot. And I was like, I want to keep the rose in there because the rose feels like part of the story. But I can do different things with the symbolism, but that had to stay in. So it's a lot of it's just, I think, instinctive and what feels like the story and what doesn't.
Yeah. That's the sense that I kind of got, like reading your stories and having read so many of these stories growing up. But like one of the main things is when it comes to fairy tales, the plot of these stories, like the original versions, is kind of a nonsensical a lot of the times. It's like really hard to keep track of what the fuck is actually going on. And Greta phrased it as loosely related series of events, loosely in massive quotes.
Oh God, so yes.
When it comes to the plotting of it and taking all these basic elements, like you do cherry pick what you want to use, but then excuse me, how do you combine them into a plot that actually makes sense to a modern audience and something that they can enjoy?
Again, I think a lot of it's instinctive, but no, you're absolutely right. There are things where, you will have a character show up who seems critical, and then you never see them again at any point. And you're like, okay, but I liked her. Do we get to see her? Nope, she's gone forever. Okay. So a part of it is, identifying the parts that really feel important to the fairy tale and keeping them. Sometimes it's just, okay, I know this has to happen in the fairy tale for it to be that fairy tale. I'm of course drawing a blank now, but in order to be Sleeping Beauty, okay, we got to have the big hedge made out of thorns. It just feels like one of the important elements. So, okay, I have to construct this book in such a way that I can have a hedge made out of thorns show up, and it matters. So sometimes the plot is just trying to make the things that occur in the fairy tale logical, and see how we get to that point where this thing happens, because otherwise some things just happen out of the blue, and by the way, somebody was walking by and dropped a shoe, and then the spell broke or something, and it's like, okay, we got to do something else. And so yeah, sometimes it feels like trying to string meaning between all of these weird, signposts of just strange things going on. The funny thing is,
things
I think
that we might not have context for anymore. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah. The thing is that, as much shit as people give the Grimm brothers, I think they actually did a lot of editing for clarity and sanity. Because you read some of the other ones and you're like, wow, okay, we all complain that, they toned a lot of things down, but actually they also made these way more readable.
I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about last episode when you were studying anthropology and transcribing conversations and just speech, people talking. It's like there's so much just illogical, just inconsistencies to the ways in which humans communicate. And a lot of these fairy tales retain a lot of the logical inconsistencies that we have when we're speaking to each other in everyday conversations. Is like, why didn't you smooth that shit out at some point? Apparently, just like, nah, fuck it.
And there's also ones that you read and you're like, okay, this is 4 different fairy tales, and you were just sitting in a bar telling the story until people stopped buying you drinks. Kind of thing. And East of the Sun, West
story, Ursula. It's frame story. Come on.
East of the Sun, West of the Moon is terrible for that one, which is basically Cupid and Psyche, which goes back to the golden ass. But a lot of other there we go. All right.
Hold that closer. Hold that closer, Greta. Hold it closer. That's beautiful.
That is. But a lot of stories will start somewhere and then be like, I got to figure out where this is. Okay, so she walks for 7 years and comes to the place where he's being held, and then this happens. Yay. And so sometimes you can tell people would just use that as a wrap up to whatever they were going through.
Yeah, so it sounds like just like a balancing act that you have to try to thread the needle between the old story and the new story. But it also, I guess, brings to mind the question of theme. So how do you approach including or not including the original themes of these fairy tales, whether it's love conquers all or, just be a nice, virtuous person, while also adding your own complexity and the nuance that I think modern audiences are really kind of looking for in stories?
I mostly try not to worry about it. Theme is a thing that people come up with after the book is written. And the big thing with theme is that it seems like something that happens sort of after the book is written. People realize what the theme is. I just try not to worry about it. I'm more trying to get the characters from point A to point B. And themes that come out, I think, emerge more from my subconscious than anything else. A lot of writing this is why I'm terrible at teaching writing. People ask me to teach workshops, and I'm like, okay, the only way I know how you write a book is you write the sentence in your head, and then you write the next sentence, and then you repeat for 100,000 words. There's the whole class. We're done. I think a lot of it's instinctive. I don't worry about balancing it. I just try to write the book and hope it all comes out in the wash.
Yeah. What about the characters? Because I feel like the characters, especially, you know, from generations that grew up on Disney and stuff like that, the characters are so iconic. You know, you have your Snow White, you have your Beauty and the Beast, whatever, like Hansel and Gretel, like these characters are just so iconic. But when it comes to reimagining, how do you allude to or twist around these well-known characters and also shift the point of view to give the story a fresh perspective?
Well, there's been a thing for a while of doing things from the villain's point of view and trying to figure out why the villain is doing things. And I loved Maleficent. I enjoyed the heck out of that movie. I realize I'm one of about 5 people, but God damn it, it was great. Particularly the crow. But we've almost hit a point where doing it from the villain's point of view is almost becoming a cliche now too. Like when whoever it was did Grendel way back when, yeah, that was mind blowing. But now, Disney has a series of books from the villain's point of view. So, and if Disney's doing it, we've sort of passed the new and shocking horizon. So sometimes I'm just, what if this was a totally different person? What if this was a person who acted like a real person that I understood? Because, a lot of times, characters in fairy tales act very weird, and you're like, you're just going to casually accept that? Okay, fine, if you say so. So sometimes it's just having a character who will hang a lampshade on how weird everything is and be like, seriously? Do you all see this too? And sometimes, I just try to find a direction that doesn't seem to have been done. Like, I think the only one where I really went anywhere new was Thornhedge, where I decided, what if the villain is actually Sleeping Beauty, and there's a reason that you want to keep her locked up, and for the love of God, don't let her out. And I was like, this seems like a great idea. And I actually had a reviewer tell me, I have never seen this one before. I have not seen that one. I'm like, oh, I'm touched. But yeah, you just gotta find, because everybody in their own head is acting logically. So if people are doing these things that are obviously completely batshit, you have to go and find the direction from where what they're doing is sane and sensible. And sometimes a lot of the story is just that.
Just creating like a sense of reality to this
justification,
yeah, for these very surreal actions.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying, I don't know if it got cut off before or not, but the Grimm brothers absolutely edited for clarity. And there was a book that came out a little while ago, and by a little while I probably mean a decade, called The Turnip Princess and Other Stories, that was billed as how great it was. It was all these, stories that had been found, from the same age, and which hadn't got included in the Grimm brothers collections. And I read about 3/4 of the book and went, I understand why none of these were included, because they were mostly versions of, recognizable, sort of tangentially related to the Grimm brothers stuff, but also a lot of them were just bad and incoherent. And you're like, okay, that is, I suppose, meets the technical definition of a story. But yeah, just an event happens, and then an event happens, and then another one happens at the end.
But it's like B-sides are B-sides for a reason.
Yeah.
So. Right. And every now, it was frustrating because every now and then you would find this amazing little gem. Like there was a version of Beauty and the Beast where he was a talking crow, and if he pulls out one of his quills and says, if you need anything, just write your request with this feather. as a quill pen. And I'm like, that is a lovely detail. Yeah, that is great. Otherwise, it's just Beauty and the Beast, only not as good. And yeah, just a lot of things like that. Like 30 versions of the same story where, okay, it's Cupid and Psyche, except he turns into a stone lion statue during the day for reasons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just reasons. You don't need to know. That's for you to just figure out for yourself.
But I think the idea of character two-dimensionality is kind of what makes approaching fairy tale retellings difficult for some writers, because like you mentioned with Snow White before, like she has no agency really. And that's the true of many fairy tale heroes and heroines throughout the canon. So if you have, for any writers in the crowd who are like, no, I really want to write a story from Belle's perspective or Rapunzel's perspective, how do you take these timeless yet two-dimensional characters and bring them to life? Is it just a matter of psychology to you, or do you think there's anything else that you could bring to the table?
I mean, usually at that point, you got to start like warping the events themselves to give you some agency. Like, you know, Snow White has to hit the huntsman over the head and make a run for it or something. For Sleeping Beauty in particular, there's a really excellent book by Robin McKinley called Spindle's End that is one of my favorite fairy tale retellings ever. And and it does an interesting thing in that it starts with the point of view of the fairy godmother who is basically suddenly has this infant, and they're like, get her out of here before something terrible happens. And it's like, you know, a teenager going, oh my God, I have to get home with this infant, and while evil fairies are stalking me. And then kind of segues fairly seamlessly into the Sleeping Beauty's perspective, essentially. And she doesn't want to be a princess. She wants basically to be a veterinarian and take care of horses and things. And it's
said every horse girl ever.
right. It is absolutely worth reading, just as a masterclass in retelling. Not least of which, and this has nothing to do with anything, but I'm still in awe of it. The first chapter is entirely an info dump about the kingdom. And it is so readable and so elegant that it just flows, and you're reading it and you're like, this is great. I'm enjoying it. And it does not feel like, 99 million, in the beginning, the gods fought and this was a hero and you need to remember these 6 names and whatnot. It's just this lovely conversational chapter. And then towards the end, you get to, and the king and the queen, had a daughter kind of thing. And it is like, if you're an aspiring writer, go read that just for the fact she pulled that off.
A masterclass in fantasy prologues.
Yeah, it is craft at like the highest level.
If only like 99% of fantasy authors had read that and figured out how not to info dump at the beginning of a chunky ass book.
It's
like,
so hard.
5,000 words at the beginning of like a 500,000.
And if they're italicized, I'm going to leave the room. Like that's the one that.
Fuck
this. Seriously.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I want to talk to you about something that I really love about just reimaginings in general, but in the case of fairy tales, it's really fun to play around with it. But subversion, in the sense of how you subvert reader expectations, manipulate them, knowing that they probably know what this story is, the original version, and here's what my reimagining is. So how do you use subversion to kind of play around with the reader's experience and their expectations?
Well, the thing is, we've, as I was saying earlier, we've almost hit a point where we expect things to be subverted. So it's very hard to subvert a thing when it's like watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Right. You're just like, okay, what's the twist? I'm waiting. And
then it's double subversion. No,
right. So you can make yourself nuts, worrying about that. One thing I really like to do is assuming that my readers have read at least have the understanding of the fairy tale, but also assuming that some of them are geeks like me and have read like the original Grimm or whatever. I will throw in almost, if it was a video game, they'd be Easter eggs of references to, you have, the character in the Beauty and the Beast think, something about, oh God, all we need now is monkey butlers or something like that. Just you throw in callbacks to things that readers will, that a lot of readers will know, or even, to some of the Disney movies, honestly. And as long as you're not like too twee or snide about it, because then you kind of break immersion. But the people will spot the Easter eggs, and then they will feel really smart. And if I go away from a book feeling like I am smart, that's a great experience. I enjoy that. I want to buy another one of that person's books because I want to feel smart, kind of thing. It's a lot of books. A lot of the very popular and long-lasting writers are very much about the plot of the book, but also about how they make you as a reader feel about yourself. Like, part of Pratchett's success is that you would go away feeling like you were feeling wiser or something. And I think Lois McMaster Bujold, you go away feeling smart and things like that. Stephen King has a really great way with language where he will like start introducing words and references and things. And then by the end of it, you'll get a character thinking in stream of consciousness that would be incoherent if you read it before you'd read the rest of the book, because it's all these callbacks to all of these phrases. Like, in Pet Sematary, it's a man's heart if stonier ground will just keep popping up in the middle of the character's thoughts, things like that. But because you recognize the reference, you feel like you're almost in an in-joke with the writer or something. And he's made this kind of like shared space where you both know something that the rest of the world doesn't, kind of thing. And I think that's if you can pull that off, then you don't need to listen to me talk about anything else. Frankly, you're covered. Come on the podcast and tell everybody how you're doing it. But that's some of it. So just interjecting little bits that, you will recognize if you are a lover of fairy tales is a way that I like to go forth.
I like that. So not necessarily subversion, but inclusion and giving the reader a sense, giving the reader a sense of that in joke, that intimacy with the story, and that intimacy kind of feeds back into their own experience and their own emotional response to it.
Absolutely. And I will say, when I was writing a lot of children's books, the whole Hamster Princess series is subverted fairy tales, but you can get away with that more with kids because they do not have they haven't seen so many subversions. They aren't expecting it quite so much. So it's still kind of fresh, and you can have, basically, she was supposed to be Sleeping Beauty. She's basically Xena Warrior Princess, only she's a hamster. I came up with the whole idea because I thought, what if you pricked your finger on a hamster wheel instead of a spinning wheel, and basically wrote the whole book, the first book, in a Starbucks over the weekend. And got 6 books out of it somehow. But and then, it was fun because we had the character who's like, to heck with this. I'm gonna go find a solution to this, or if you're she's in, one of them was based on Little Red Riding Hood, and it was because they were hamsters, I had to use weasel wolves, and who are basically werewolves, and one of them shows up and very scary, and the princess is like, oh my God, bite me and make me a werewolf, please. That would be so cool. Because when I was a kid, I would have loved that. I would have been, sign me up to be a werewolf. So, so you can get away with some of those things. And also, I know a lot of people who would be like, I can be a werewolf. Yeah, hook me up.
Hell yeah. Make me a werewolf.
Well, it kind of reminds me, because we've been talking a little bit about, we've been alluding throughout the episode about how dark the original source material is. And compared to the very sanitized Disney version that so many people are, familiar with now, the original stories almost seem subversive to us. So why do you think these fairy tales have become so sanitized compared to the older versions? And why do you think the older versions were so dark to begin with? Do you have any theories?
The Victorians. That's my whole theory right there.
Full stop.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that was it. And even if you go and read the original Grimm and Andrew Lang's various color fairy books are also a huge source of fairy tales and to give Lang credit, even though, yes, he knew they were for kids, he certainly bowdlerized a lot. He also pulled in a whole bunch of fairy tales from other cultures, which at the time was an impressive bit of work. That was not a thing you'd expect. So I have to give him some credit for that there. It was what the audience wanted. And, when Disney was doing their movies, you had the Hays Code or the Comics Code, whatever the one is. And so they have a niche. Family friendly entertainment, that this has to be G-rated. And I think a lot of it is just came down, frankly, to market forces at that point. So I don't think there was necessarily a huge conspiracy to cover up the dark bits. It was just that the appetite for that, the pendulum swung all the way to the 50s, and having Bambi's mother die was horrible and shocking, and then it swung back the other way, and we get Angela Carter in the Bloody Chamber kind of thing. So it's just, I think the fairy tales stick around, and the portrayals just depend on where you are in history at that point. I think there's a lot to be said for the darker versions of many fairy tales. There are others where I'm like, a good author could probably do something with this. I can't do anything with the original Sleeping Beauty. That is just not. I can't work with that. That's too much. I keep coming back to Robin McKinley, but seriously, people, the only one of the very few fairy tales that deals with the sexual assault that is very common in fairy tales is Deerskin by Robin McKinley. It is genuinely brilliant, and I heard an agent on an interview once say 99.9% of the time I will tell you, do not send me a book with sexual assault in it, but Deerskin exists, and if you can write like that, you can. You probably can't write like that, but it's so yeah. There are some things where, do we really need to cut off the stepsister's feet for the thing? Maybe if you have a really good reason to. I think that's Cinderella. In the original, they cut off their toes and their heel to fit in the slipper. And I can absolutely imagine a way you could construct a book where that would be plot relevant. But for the most part, I'm just like, we can skip that bit. I can't. I don't really feel the need to mutilate this minor character for something. So
yeah, pick and choose whatever works.
Absolutely. And whereas at the same time, if I was doing Rapunzel, yeah, I would absolutely blind the prince. Let's go for it. So yeah.
But that's something I love about your books, is because it's very clear to me that recapturing this darkness is something that you bring into your reimaginings. So how do you kind of bring in the horror and bring in the gothic aesthetics and mood and atmosphere into your stories? How does that play into how you approach your reimaginings?
Well, I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula at a formative age. That's the one horror movie I did watch because my mother had gotten over the evangelical thing, and for some reason wanted to watch it 5 times in the theater, which in retrospect may have been the fact she was single at the time, and Gary Oldman was pretty hot in that movie. Anyway, so
sexualized vampires, bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. Ironically, the one vampire book I have coming has the least sexualized vampire in history, but I've forgotten the question. Oh yeah, the dark gothic thing. Sorry, I was still with Gary Oldman for a minute there.
Happens to us all.
Yeah. Part of it is just the aesthetic. You like that. Part of it is that, as I think I said in the last chunk of interview, frequently I will write sort of horror things that are creepier than I realize they are at the time. Partly because I'm, sort of in control of it, so I don't have to be scared of it, I suppose, if that makes sense. So sometimes the dark stuff will show up and people will be like, that was a really creepy sequence. And I'll be like, oh, cool, neat. So it's, occasionally I set out deliberately to do like dark, weird things. Usually I set out to do weird things more than dark. I'm just like, I haven't seen this. Let's do something bizarre. And frequently that winds up being unsettling just because we aren't expecting it. In Nettle and Bone, I had a thing called a thief wheel, which I invented out of whole cloth, which is just this thing that's sort of an amalgamation of a whole bunch of like spirits of dead grave robbers that is just sort of rolling through the halls, screaming and occasionally apologizing. And a lot of my friends were like, that thing was horrifying. I'm like, really? I just kind of thought it was sort of like a D&D monster kind of thing. And one of them said it was the apologizing that got to her, because she was like, she was like, that would be me. I would be, sucked into a horrible monster, and I would be saying, "Oh God, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, yeah.
So you have spent time in the Midwest.
Yes, as a matter of fact, 10 years. But it's a lot of times like horror is sometimes it's the overarching whole setting with the vampires and the red curtains and the Gothic architecture, but sometimes it's just the weird little detail, like, the thing apologizing. Or I think Raymond Chandler said that people thought they liked the action in his books, but what they actually liked was the weird little details, like the guy who was trying to pick up a paperclip as he was dying and kept thinking and was not thinking about dying, just that he couldn't seem to pick up the paperclip. And he was like, that was the scene that stuck with people, not all the gunfire. It was just the little moments like that get to people. So I think, but I don't know if it's necessarily possible to do that deliberately. Probably Raymond Chandler could do it. I don't know if I can.
Well, speaking of your brand of like dark, bizarre atmosphere, it definitely does translate into like the world building itself of the stories that you write. What are some ways that authors can use the world itself and the setting and just the feeling of the atmosphere to convey new ideas and perspectives about the fairy tales that they are trying to reimagine?
I think a lot of it may come down to just thinking very, very seriously about, and this sounds so boring when I say it, but the socioeconomic conditions that get you there. Like in The Seventh Bride, I have the miller's daughter, which I picked because miller's daughters show up for some reason in a lot of stories. And a nobleman shows up and is like, I'm going to marry you. And everybody has to pretend this is normal and okay because they can't say no. And that's never covered in the fairy tale. It's just she was the beautiful miller's daughter and a nobleman fell in love with her and decided to marry her. But noblemen do not marry peasants for the most part. And if they do, the peasants smile and go along with it because otherwise everybody's screwed. And so that was like part of the world building was, what are we doing here? Why is this happening? And because it was to a certain extent a young adult, why is everyone going along with this? And then the realization, oh, my parents can't stop this. No one can stop this because he has all the power and I just have to go along with this. And that really sucks. I think in terms of world building and fairy tales, in terms of getting to some of the human elements, is just think about how the world had to get to that point and what it really means and what is getting glossed over sometimes. In Nettle and Bone, which was not actually a fairy tale retelling, weirdly enough, I just like pulled a whole bunch of fairy tale elements into it. But if it's a retelling of anything, actually it is closest to The Princess and the Pea, which is messed up. But there was completely random. when I was doing the hamster books, my editor suggested I wanted to do Dracula for a hamster book, and my editor was like, "That is not a fairy tale." I'm like, "It's close enough. We could have Renfield be a flying squirrel. Come on, it'll be great." Uh, it no, they did not go for that. But she was like, "What about the Princess and the Pea?" And I was like, "The Princess and the Pea is a monumentally fucked up story, because why does the prince want a wife that bruises if there is a pea under a stack of mattresses? Like, that's weird shit when you look at it too deeply. I cannot work with that. That is not going to be fun and kids book if I do it. That is going to go bad places. And then I went Nettle and Bone, where it kind of did go bad places. But so you just have to ask the questions like, why is this thing we're all accepting okay? And sometimes a lot of fairy tales, it's why are we accepting this, and what exactly are we accepting? There's a whole series of it's a trope, the third sister, the king or whoever marries the first sister, she dies the second one, she dies the third one, they live happily ever after. And another thing that went into Nettle and Bone for me was, are you just gonna marry the dude who just killed both of your sisters? Like, you're just gonna be okay with that? We're all gonna smile and nod through that? No, we are not. We're gonna have issues with that. So
when it comes up, accident, do you really want to go to dinner with that guy?
Or do you want to be in the same bed as that man? Hell
yeah. There's a whole bunch of them that fall into that category, and which was another thing. I was just like, third sisters are really expected to, accept a lot, and no, we are not doing that today. In fact, why don't we move fast, and maybe we won't even have the second sister die. That'll be great. We can see where this is going. But so I would guess in terms of world building, you have to have you have to understand the setting that leads that. And the other thing I will say involves magic. Magic in fairy tales is not like D&D. D&D, you know exactly what you can do. And there are many fantasy novels where magic system is laid out, perfectly, and you know exactly what can be done within it and what can't. And that's fine. If that's the kind of fantasy novel you want, Brandon Sanderson has more money than I ever will. It's totally cool. No problem with that. Fairy tales that read like fairy tales, the magic does not work like that. Why is this woman been turned into a reindeer? Okay, because why is she she can come back 3 times but not past that? Why? Just because. Okay, why can't you go out at night? Because. Why does the wolf talk? Because he does. It's just there are magic is a thing that is not fully understood and is not necessarily something you can rely on. It is a frightening force that it's more like weather than right.
Cannot be controlled.
It's like a natural disaster in some ways, and it just happens to you, and okay, that sucks, pick up the pieces. But so part of, I think, making fairy tales really feel sort of true to fairy taleness is the sort of weird, arbitrary nature of magic in them in some regards. Like, I have no idea what the Dust Wife in Nettle and Bone could actually do. She could do what she did in the book, and I knew that much. She could maybe do other things. No idea. It was not, I never sat down and rolled up her stats as a 18th level warlock or whatever. So it's, I think the unknown factors a lot in that, and also to the creepy factor, because if you don't know what it can do, it could happen to you, and and in the course of a fairy tale usually does.
Yeah, it's the softest of magic systems, but the most terrifying.
Yeah, and I like a lot of Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea books. I'm still not 100% on how magic worked in those, except that it involved names, and I think it was deliberately kind of arbitrary and a little abstract, because that kept it feeling magical and not like, another form of science that you just, have to manipulate properly.
Yeah. And I think that's a good note to end on, in the fact that you kind of really summed it up well, that not just the magic system, but fairy tales as a whole, there's this abstractness to it. There's this unknown quality to it. And I think that's potentially why they've been so long lasting and so vital to the human experience and our storytelling, and the way we share lessons, like however fucked up they may be. We somehow impart lessons through these stories, and they're really malleable. And I think that malleability of the source material is really perfect for anyone who wants to tackle fairy tale reimaginings. And Ursula, honestly, like, this has been a ton of fun, and we're so grateful to you for sharing all of your insights into this. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Happy to do it. I will add one note on the subject of the malleability. Somebody asked Joseph Campbell once if there was any rule to fairy tales. And he said the only rule of fairy tales is that anyone that animals speak to or help wins. That is the only coherent rule across all fairy tales.
There we go. We're ending off with a golden rule of fairy tales, courtesy of Joseph Campbell. Brilliant. All right, well, that's it for this writing masterclass and our two-parter with Ursula. Thank you again for chatting with us and digging into the fucked up world of fairy tales and reimagining.
One of my favorite topics. Happy to get into the nitty-gritty with you guys.
Thank you so much. All right, well, Ursula, where can folks find you online?
You can find my website, redwombatstudio.com, which has all of the books listed, and it's possible I may even have updated it recently by the time you hear this. And if you want to find me online, these days I'm mostly on Blue Sky as K Kingfisher.
Oh, awesome. And you can go support Ursula, go pick up all her books. The newest one, Hemlock and Silver, is out now, so go check that out. If you want to see a Snow White story that's not so much about Snow White, but is about poison and is way more fun than the original story.
And does have an animal that talks.
Yes.
There you go. Golden rule.
Golden rule.
All right. You can also follow SFF Addicts across the board at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go check out my novel Mushroom Blues if you want a little fungal noir in your life. And Greta, what about you?
Yeah, I'm at Greta K. Kelly on all the things. And if we've whet your appetite for another Bluebeard story, check out The Seventh Queen. It's the second book in the Frozen Crown series. It's basically Bluebeard meets Henry VIII's last wife, but she can still see the ghosts of all of his other dead wives.
Lots of dead wives this episode. Yeah, I'm concerned.
It's a thing.
Par for the course. As well, you can go support the Thorn Food Fund. You can go pick up Among Thieves. Go feed that little furry boy. He needs more fat on his bones, and you can help MJ quit her day job.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.